Okay, we're here with Mr. George Pérez. Did I get your name right?
Pérez, yes.
Pérez,
yes.
okay. Been having an argument about that for a week.
Oh, well, it depends on what Latin dialect, you know. Some people pronounce it Pérez, some people pronounce it Pérez. Some people don't pronounce it at all, just say, hey, you, and that's the end of it.
Well, the first question that we feel that we have to ask is we traveled here all the way from Houston to find out the trophy room.
It's how much they paid me to come here without my plane. Yes.
The trophy room scene in Hulk Future Imperfect has that little green brick that Peter called you about over the phone. And
it was a strange phone call.
Yes. Our personal theory was that it was the Impossible Man that just kind of crunched down, that there was no purple in it, so we thought maybe that was off.
No, it's a brick of green kryptonite, and that was thanks to Tom Smith, who colored it green. When I drew it, I didn't indicate that it was supposed to be a green brick, but Tom wanted us, you know, why not? So we put a brick of kryptonite amidst the other bricks, which are the bricks of the original Avengers mansion.
All right.
You learned it here first.
Are there any other really obscure items in the trophy room that no one seems to notice?
Well, there are, I won't name too many of them since Peter plans to have a contest in the Comic Fighters
air
Guide.
after that.
Okay, the air after that.
And you're all disqualified.
All righty, that's right, no one here. But there are a number of things. The most obscure ones are the capes, since with the exception of color, there's nothing to really identify them. There's one that's a pale blue, which is white. There's one that's like a pale blue cape, which is a white cape, belongs to Flair from Heroic Publications.
All right.
Herbie Popnecker's Lollipops appear inside Dynamo's belt in issue 2. Spawn's necklace. The Cosmic Cube and the Infinity Gauntlet. So you realize that two of the most impressive weapons are no longer there. The Bottle City of Kandor. Wonder Woman's tiara, Wonder Girl's lasso, because it doesn't glow, so it can't be Wonder Woman's lasso, so it has to be Wonder Girl's original lasso. Robin's original cape. The Batarang. Rick Jones's guitar.
Cool.
So there was a number of items there. And the Fantastic Car. And amongst the remains, Peter David's, my own, Bobby Chase, Rita Smith, who's Tom Smith's wife. And there's a little cigar box that people can't read. It has Reed Richards and Franklin Richards. They couldn't find Sue Richards for obvious reasons. Invisible Woman, for those who don't know.
So can you tell us how you got involved in the Hulk Future Imperfect project?
Well, the Hulk Future Imperfect was strictly my desire to work with Peter David, who I consider one of the best writers in the business. And my wife had read some of his Star Trek paperback novels,
right,
and loved them too. So I called her. I'm going to give a call to Peter, whom I liked as a person, and asked him if there's anything we can work on together. So I came to him. He didn't come to me. I came to him. And it seems that Future Imperfect had been hanging around for about a year or so, maybe less. I'm not sure. Originally, it was supposed to go to Sam Keith. And maybe Dale Kiln, but it definitely was supposed to go to Sam Keith because Sam's name was on the script when it was sent to me. And Sam couldn't do it. There was at that point they didn't know who was going to do it. It probably would have ended up going to someone relatively new, just so they could have the book out. This was planned way before the 2099 series. So I called up I called up Peter. He in turn said he'll talk to Bobby Chase. Bobby, when Peter called her, said, he told her, I think I've got an artist on this book. Finally, on Future Imperfect, she asked who it was. I said, it's George Pérez. And according to what Peter said, she squealed in delight and went out into the hallway and saw Tom DeFalco. So we have the artist on Future Imperfect finally. And he said, and again asking who, I said, George Pérez. And he said, good work, Bobby. It was as if Bobby got all the credit for it.
Right.
And I got the plot the very next day. They wanted to make sure I didn't change my mind, I guess. Yeah. So, and I had a great time with it. It was one of those books that, unlike the other books I had done previously, I had no initial emotional involvement with, since I had nothing to do with the Hulk. So anything that Peter wanted, I tried to be as faithful to. The first plot was a lot more complete. It was broken down more page by page. because it was planned for Sam as opposed to me. When the second plot was done, which was done after I was already on the project, it became a lot looser. He allowed me a lot more room for interpretation. And in the case of the museum, only about 5 or 6 items were actually mentioned by Peter, and everything else I just added it as I went along, which is my history. When I did Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marv only had a few characters in there, and I just kept adding more and more and more. The cover of issue 5, for example, Marv suggested maybe the maximum 3 or 4 heads on the cover. There were 97 by the time I got through.
That's great. Well, how did you enjoy working with Peter David?
Immensely. That's why after finishing that, Peter wanted to work on something together again, and we are currently working on a 4-part series for Epic called Sachs and Violens, S-A-C-H-S, and Violens, V-I-O-L-E-N-S, referring to a photographer who used to take pictures during the Vietnam War, Violens, lens as in camera lens. And being an Epic book under their heavy hitters line, it's a suggested for mature readers banner. But Peter, it seems like I'm always there when Peter's run out of people, because as it turns out, Sachs and Violens has been around for about 5 years or so, and a bunch of different artists have either turned it down or it went through a number of turnarounds, either because of the artist decision or editorial decision. So when I came in, Peter had asked, this one Peter came to me and approached me about Sachs and Violens, and kindly offered me the co-ownership of the trademark and copyright, so he can finally get this book out. So that is. So in Sachs and Violens, I don't know if this is going to reflect. No, you don't have that much light. Yes, that is going to be our next project together. He's also suggested possibly working on, of all things, a children's book.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Peter sent me 2 of his poems. He wrote children's poems. This man does everything. He's shellacking my patio even as we speak, and he wanted to do something that would challenge me, because obviously I'd have to pick out a total different style to work. So hopefully that we'll get around to doing that as well.
Right. You mentioned the Crisis series. How did you enjoy that series? Do you have any fond memories of that? Memories?
I can still look back at Crisis as far as from an artistic point of view and enjoy it immensely. The fact that in serving its purpose, it's failed, since the DC universe became more confusing than ever, and DC themselves violated the tenets of Sachs and Violens by Superman. It started from the very beginning when right after Crisis, where Superman is shown still existing, and then John Byrne totally recreated him and said, okay, now we've created our first flaw. Right. Yeah, at least Wonder Woman was devolved, so we had some place to start her from scratch. And then Hawkman later on, they started violating a lot of their own rules there. Marv Wolfman's original idea, which DC wouldn't do, not that I really blame them, but imagine what kind of publicity they could have gotten out of it, was to have every single comic that DC produced right after Crisis on Infinite Earth 12 came out start with issue 1.
Right.
And they could either start all their stories from scratch or continue with a different background. The amount of publicity they would have gotten on a daring move like that would have been phenomenal. Right. But unfortunately, DC had cold feet. They just wouldn't follow through on something at that grand a scale.
Right.
And in the case of Superman, they kept him alive. He was originally supposed to be killed at the end of Crisis so they can recreate Superman, but this was before John Byrne came into the equation. Right. So they had no one to recreate him at the time. It didn't seem to bother them that they had no one to recreate Wonder Woman when they devolved her. Kind of shows you how well she was considered.
Yeah, I've always had a hard time trying to explain DC continuity to people.
Now it's
that
impossible.
Crisis thing.
Now it's impossible.
If they'd all done what they did with Superman, that might have gone a little bit smoother. This new starting point, and
Yeah, but the thing is, they do too many new starting points in random order. Hawkman being the worst example. The fact that now they've had all these stories post-Crisis, then they start him all over again. Right. They're creating their own multiple universes again.
Right. Sort of jump tracks. Do you have a standpoint on the raging writer-artist debate that we always see in CBG?
Well,
I know you've done some writing yourself.
Yes, and the thing is, I enjoy writing, but I know full well that I only like to write books that I have something to say in. I do not consider myself arrogant enough as a writer that I'm going to insist that I write all my own work because I think I'm better than another writer who does only writing. The fact that a writer seems to be penalized because he can't draw, I think, is very insulting for comics in general. A good comic, as opposed to a good selling comic, should be a perfect symbiosis of a good story and good artwork, good storytelling artwork. Not necessarily just being able to draw well, but be able to tell a story well. Two people who can tell stories well. We have to start from the story. There are an excellent of people who can both write and draw, and there are those who can write well and can't draw, and vice versa, that they can draw well, but they shouldn't be writing. The fact that the art is what makes it a comic book. I mean, without the comic book, it's a novel. I mean, there is a distinction, there is an importance to the artwork in the fact that it is what makes a comic book a comic book. Otherwise, it wouldn't be that. You need the artwork, or it wouldn't be a comic. But just because it's a comic doesn't make it a good story unless you have a good writer there. Right. And the latest trend towards jazzy visuals over content can be dangerous. I mean, it's basically junk food. You know, it tastes fine, but it's very unsatisfying, not very nutritional.
Right.
I sought out Peter David because I consider him an excellent writer. Mm-hmm. If Peter were able to draw, he'd be unstoppable. The fact that he's developed as good a reputation as he has without being able to draw is uncanny. Very good writers out there who are treated like second-class citizens because they can't draw their own books. And while there are exceptional writer-artists, Frank Miller, Dan Jurgens, who I consider an exceptional writer as well as an artist, Walt Simonson, and many others, there are those who should not be writing their own work because they don't really have an understanding of what writing is all about, of characterization, of careful plotting, of an understanding that a story cannot be all climaxes. You know, every scene can't be a climax. There has to be a build-up, there has to be a denouement. There's a fancy word. I remember that from English class. But there has to be a real sense of structure, you know. In Julius Caesar, all this character development, then you have that big climax of first turning point of Caesar being killed. Right. Then all the denouement characterization building up to the climax of the war, which they're getting out searching out the conspirators, the final conspirators, Cassius and Brutus, and then the denouement after the deaths of the characters. Pacing is so important, but if you had Julius Caesar killed from point one and everyone just battling and fighting, then you have a riot. You don't have a story, you have a riot. And riots, like car accidents, are something people love to watch, but when you leave there you feel like all you've gotten is that roller coaster thrill, but nothing you're gonna take with you to that's gonna really help you in life as far as a life experience. You've gotten the thrill, you've gotten it out of your system, you've gotten the catharsis, but you haven't gotten any mental stimulation.
Okay.
There are people out there, which is why I'm facing this way and not always at the camera.
Oh, no, that's good. I've seen you speaking to many aspiring artists today. Do you have any basic advice that you give to everyone that shows you their work?
Oh yeah, like stay away. I don't need competition. I'm getting too old to have young people coming in. Well, primarily the one thing, which is very hard for a lot of young people to come in the way the business is today, is to come in for the sheer love of drawing or writing, and not just to make a quick buck. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the old thing of when doctors in the old days used to hear, we're going to medical school because we want to help society, as opposed to I want to buy a new Porsche. That you should have a great love for storytelling. If you're an artist and you want to show your work, and you obviously have to build a good portfolio. Remember, for every Superman there's a Clark Kent. For every dynamic person in tights, you should be able to draw a normal person, able to sit at a table, at a desk, in a subway station, obviously my New York roots, anything that's normal. So many people are so into the cyberpunk look or the superhero in tights look, that they forget that the thing that makes them super is comparison to normality.
Right.
And you have to always remember that you have to have some kind of foundation in reality to go to surreality. And when you're doing comics for any artist who wants to show a portfolio, when you're showing a portfolio, do not show poster work, because that's not what comics are all about. What we're doing is doing storyboarding. What we're doing is pacing a story visually. You put your mind in the mode of a silent film camera, not a sound camera, wherein you're trying to impart as much information on a page visually to tell the person what's going on. They may not understand the nuances, they may not understand the whys and wherefores that the action is going on, but they can tell what's going on. The second a writer has to say, the person is walking down the street, because you can't tell that the person is walking down the street, right, means you have failed as a storyteller. And that is very, very important. Storytelling, both as, from the writer and the artist point of view, is fundamental to comics. There have been a lot of artists, myself included, who got into the business not being all that polished as an artist, but had a good knack for storytelling. Right. And they figured they can help you learn the basics of drawing, but storytelling is such a unique talent, a unique gift that you either have it or you can be trained to a certain point. But to be really good at it, it does require a basic understanding of visual stimulation, of what makes something exciting and what builds up to it. And a lot of that is from reading. You learn a lot of drawing from reading, because if you can read a story and visualize a scene, you're reading a quiet scene, it stimulates an image. Then you read an exciting scene, it stimulates an image, usually a more lasting image, a much larger image. So when you transfer that into storytelling, you lay out a page, you do smaller panels to do the setup. Then when you reach that point of high emotion, a large panel to emphasize the same way it would react in your mind.
Right. Mm-hmm. You doing okay on tape? It's flashing.
Yeah, it's flashing there.
I just thought it was the yield side.
Have you ever discovered anyone at one of these conventions that just brought you their work and you thought that was great?
Yeah, well, I've never sponsored anyone. I've shown their work and I've recommended them, but then becomes the editor's job to decide whether they are going to be working or not. Right. There have been a number of people who've shown me their work. I've given them advice, as probably others have, and eventually they did get into the business. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing Dwayne Turner's work, Rob Liefeld, when he was a teenager as opposed to just an older kid.
Right.
Hank Cannells, who ended up writing some stuff. I remember when he was first starting out. Andy Mangels, who's a correspondent now. I'm sure there are others there who I'm just not remembering. John Stracuzzi, who's now coloring my next series with Peter David, Sachs and Violens. He was discovered, strangely enough, because I was at his store making an appearance. He owns a comic store, and he showed me his color work, and I thought it was great. And a lot of color artists I've found, and I've suggested that they try out at the companies, and at least two of them that I think of are very close to getting work now. But Rob, I think, is probably the most high profile of the success stories.
Yeah, you mentioned a project you're doing with Rob. What was that?
I'm inking Rob on Image's Youngblood Strike File. It's a story with the character Die Hard, which I'm making on Rob. Rob called me up. He's been itching to work with me. Mm-hmm. He erroneously stated, the first time George Pérez I've ever worked together. I did ink a Titans cover of his some time ago.
Oh, okay.
He just forgot about that one. And he's offering me money I couldn't turn down.
Right.
So I've already inked one cover for Image. On Brigade number 3. I inked the cover on a young artist named Marat Michaels, and I'm going to be doing the Youngblood Strike File. With no offense to Rob, I would suggest that I get the pages soon. I believe the book was originally solicited for March. It's March now, and I have not seen a pencil page yet. So I would like to get started on that.
Right. Image has been the source of a great deal of criticism in the comics community. Do you have anything to say on that? Any experience? Any personal opinions?
Well, I think controversy is a better phrase. So there are some people who are so pro-image that it is controversy as opposed to just criticism. I admire what Image has done immensely. I think it has been very good for the industry. My only problem with Image, and it's not something I have, not that I haven't even told them this, is that if you want to have a viable company, you have to have product out there. The constant lateness of the books is, I think, what's hurting Image's credibility, if not their marketability. Like, as much as people are buying the books, whether deep down in their hearts they see 10 years from now the company still existing is debatable, because they're a phenomenon, a legitimate phenomenon, but they may be a passing phenomenon. Todd McFarlane right now is taking the weight on his shoulders almost solely by being the only one who's producing a book on a consistent schedule. Sometimes he's late, but at least he's gotten at least 8 issues of a book out in a year's time. DC's been guilty of books being as late as well. Titans is being a prime example. So at least Todd realizes his responsibility to Image if he wants to have it considered a viable company. As far as any criticism on the talent, lack of whatever the feeling is towards them, no one forces anyone to buy anything, you know. If they're buying it for the investors' mentality, the investors will soon find out if a book is worth anything or not. Simple mathematics, simple economics, if you have 2 million of anything, it's not going to be worth as much as you have 50,000 of the same item. Yeah. You know, that's something that really has nothing to do with the people producing Image, as opposed to the industry itself. Marvel was heavily into the hyper marketing, which Image benefited. The kids who started Image, which I call them kids only because they are so much, except for Jim Valentino, who's the only founding member who's older than I am. They learned a lot from Marvel. They picked up a lot from the marketing techniques, and they utilized that incredibly successfully. They're the new kids on the block, literally, in the fact that they may not get the respect from many of their peers, but there's no denying that they are a influential force in the industry. Right. And I found that they have not been selfish with that. I mean, it's not that they say, "Oh, good, we're earning big bucks," nya to everyone else in the industry. They've called me, they've called other artists in order to offer work to be able to spread the wealth around. The one criticism that Image does face, and unfortunately because one of their founding members was so vocal in his statements about creating the writer-artist controversy, right, is it developed the company with a reputation of an anti-writer bias, which, unfortunately, because of the one member, and since he himself has never publicly, even though everyone knows who he is, has never publicly announced that he was the one who wrote that letter, I'm not going to mention his name on the air. I also don't think it dignified it, because I have no respect for him for not coming clean. It taints the company, because when someone has done so much to create a rift between two creative teams, two creative entities, it hurt the industry. It hurt a lot of people. It hurts to have to defend a writer, because they shouldn't have to be defended. It hurts to have to defend an artist-writer because they choose to write their own work. They shouldn't have to be defended. It's because of a small group of people creating the controversy that it still exists. The fact that you even asked the question means that it's still in people's minds. When up until that time, before that one letter, writers and artists were working together. They may not have always gotten along. They may have had delusions of grandeur where one person would think, "I'm more important than you are," or "You're more important than I am. So there's a doubter. But the fact that you work together, it's like a director thinking the movie will direct itself without a script. He may think that, but the script had to come from somewhere. He may have gone on a different tangent, but there has to be a point of reference. And I think Image's reputation was hurt by that. But having talked to some of the Image people, I am fully aware that some have great respect for writers. But they are also aware of marketing, that as long as people are buying books strictly for visuals, and that's usually the younger readers, or for just investment values, it puts writers in a situation where they constantly have to defend themselves saying we are important to a crowd which are saying, well, how can you be important? We never read your book, we just put them in a plastic bag, and that's the end of it. You know, right. that cheapens the writer, and that cheapens the artist. I mean, I don't like the idea that I draw a comic and a person buys a book that's sealed in a Mylar bag that's never been opened. Hey, I could have very well have just drawn the cover, vouchered for empty pages, never drawn a thing, and you still would have sold the same book, because people would think that it was in there. Mm-hmm. I was talking to someone recently. He would ask, when I received a promotional copy of Robin 3, which had that moving cover, and I looked at it, it was in a plastic bag. After a while, I said, I guess I'm going to look inside and see how that thing moves. I looked at it and said, it was okay. And then I decided, well, let's see now after seeing this jazzy cover, opening the inside. The insides were blank. Since it was a promotional book, it wasn't meant for sale. But beyond the fact that it was sent to me through DC's comp list, there was nothing on the cover that said it was a promotional copy. If any of those books were sold by any dealers, they could technically sell a person a book that has absolutely no artwork inside, knowing full well the second they open that book, the book becomes worthless. There's no reason to have any artwork inside. And the only person who will be hurt is a person who legitimately wants to read and enjoy a comic book. An investor will never open it. A person buying it for investment value has no reason to open it. The only person who will ever be hurt by a merchandising ploy like that is a person who legitimately wanted to read the comic. And the second that person opens up a comic and feels that they've just been ripped off, you've lost that person as a reader for life. And that is a very, very dangerous thing I can see happening. Ooh, lecturing. I got heavy.
That's good. The last thing that we like to touch on in all of our interviews, we're going to compile them later, is on the topic of censorship. We always ask if our interviewee has ever had a personal experience with some of their stuff being censored, or economic pressure being put on them because of content, or if you just have a statement to make about censorship. Anything that comes to mind, we would appreciate your comments on camera.
Well, as far as censoring, I'm totally against censorship, but I am totally for a person understanding what they're buying. Because of the conception of comics as a children's medium, predominantly in this industry, I think a parent is entitled to be warned of the content matter. It's like if you see a bunch of coloring books, understand, and one of them is a coloring book about nude women, a parent has a right to know that that coloring book is not meant for your child. Because otherwise they'd have no reason to think it shouldn't be, because there's nothing to tell you otherwise. Right. I think once that responsibility is taken upon by the publisher and by the dealers, that if they have books that are listed as suggested for mature readers, that they make sure it doesn't get to the hands of the younger crowd. You know, don't make it accessible to them. Right. Then it's also up to the parent then saying, well, then tell a child not to be, well, if it says suggested for mature readers, suggested for an adult, you are not that. You should not be. Everyone has the responsibility. But then, as an adult, if I saw that book, I am perfectly entitled to buy it for my own purpose. If I am raising a child, and I have raised a child not to be bothered by a thing like that, it's my choice as a parent then, if I want that child to read it. But everyone has to take responsibilities for their action. The companies, I think, once they label what they deem as mature matter as such, they've acted responsibly. They've done their point. That means the book has every right to be printed, because they have fulfilled their obligation to their readership. The readership then has to educate themselves. Everyone likes to have a scapegoat because everyone gets very lazy. They say, well, I don't want to be responsible for what my child reads. If my child picks up something dirty, it's the person who prints it's fault. No, the child bought it. If the store owner knew it was an adult book, then it's the store owner's fault. The store owner shouldn't be penalized for carrying it. He should be penalized for selling it to the child. And if the book is sold by the store owner because it didn't have any kind of warning, then it's the publisher's fault. The fine line there is that something is offensive to everybody. I did a cover where it was a character called Dr. Fate. She's a female character, and in her crotch area, I did a shiny effect to show where the folds of the body go. And one person sent in livid, accusing us of printing a woman with pubic hair on the cover of a comic book, despite the fact that she's wearing a gold costume. She said, "Oh, that must have been a miscoloring." So obviously they were adding little details in order to strengthen their argument. There are going to be times when you get people who are going to see demons at every corner. You can't help it if people are going to find something dirty with anything. I mean, since history, there has always been stuff that we consider classics now or consider totally innocuous now that people were highly offended by. You can't control people's taste. If they don't like the matter, they don't buy it. That's simple as all that. They don't buy it. It shouldn't stop people from publishing it, because what's offensive in Houston, Texas is not going to be offensive in New York City. What's offensive in North Dakota is not going to be offensive in California. And you can't have one arbitrary, all-encompassing judgment of what is or is not indecent, because it really varies from person to person. Some people are so easily offended, and sometimes not because of obscenity, but the idea that it is something that they just don't agree with, and that becomes very dangerous.
All right. Well, thank you.
Oh, I've got one question.
Okay.
Yes. Kind of along the same lines. Alan Moore has recently been saying he feels responsible for the violent trend in comics lately. Do you feel comics are too violent right now, or is there anything you think you can do about it?
Comics being violent, I mean, it's like a reflection.
Wolverine.
Yeah. Now, the one thing about the visceral feeling of elation that you get from a violent character is part of society now. Obviously, you look at films, you look at the heroes of today, that they seem to be a very, very act on their impulses as opposed to thinking a situation through. Whether it's good, I think it's more subjective, because if it's the only thing that we're giving them, we are guilty for popularizing that myth that might makes right, that the only difference between a hero and a villain is who's left standing, and that their means of reaching a goal are the same. It's just, again, one is stronger than the other. That is a dangerous thing to teach a person. The fact that such people exist shouldn't be denied. The fact that there should be a alternative example, I think is a responsible thing to do. I remember when the criticism towards Superman used to be, well, he's such a big Boy Scout. And finally, it occurred to me, what the hell was wrong with being a Boy Scout? When did suddenly being a Boy Scout become the equivalent of being, a pariah in society? Before, it used to be something you wish to attain. When did our values become so skewed that a person who is basically trying to lead a good life, a non-violent life, is considered wishy-washy because of the fact that he does not want to be prone to violence? The fact that we live in a violent age, that sometimes violence is warranted, is inescapable. But the fact that to idolize the soldier strictly because the soldier has to use a weapon, and then belittle a peacemaker strictly because they want to try to talk, have the first option of talking a situation through before violence becomes the next necessary step, I think is ridiculous. And it's like you're basically trying to popularize the idea of a militaristic form of action for any situation. And the second you do that, what's the difference between blowing a person away because, you know, he's threatening to kill you, and blowing a person away simply because he disagrees with you. You can start rationalizing it to every degree. If violence is your only recourse, you'll use violence for any situation. The boy crying wolf. Take that analogy now to the boy shooting the wolf. He'll shoot the wolf whether he's there or not now, because of the fact that he thinks the wolf is there. He'll shoot it, or and the second the wolf is there, he'll keep shooting. But that doesn't excuse all the carnage. You know, the old thing about that you should be prepared for that bear. Granted, but you should also try maybe to avoid the damn bear. He wasn't doing anything to you until you provoked him.
That's good.
Okay.
You made me say one little promo for our show. Like, don't go away. There's more Oblivion on the way soon.
Yes. Don't go away. Oblivion is upon us, and it will be back.
Great.
I actually had a story called Oblivion Upon Us. It's one of the chapters of Prices on Infinite Earths.
Cool. Cool.
Books to sign.
And we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. How I carry on. I like the fact that I had an audience. I can make eye contact with
Yeah,
people,
that was good.
Yeah, that's
Here, you want to hand me the mic under the table?
Have you seen?
Thank you. Yes, I do. I have man wolf. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth one is small one. I only have like 1 or 2 more. Okay.
You still recording, Vic? Unplug this.
He's actually listening to his own label code?
You want to see?
He's pretty proud of himself.
I did read this. I really want it.
Great story. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you.
The artwork inside those.
It was fun. Boy.
Sorry. Storyline was good too.
Thank you. I love this. The peanut gallery seats here.
You've been called worse.
Or less.
You realize the next step to peanut gallery is the nut house.
Yes.
We've been there. They're probably looking for us right now.
And I'll trust you to edit that. So sometimes I know sometimes when I ramble, I say, oh, I've lost my train of thought. I know it's going in somewhere. I don't know where I'm going now. That's it. Thank you.
Sorry.
What? Yeah, the red one.
Okay, what's your, how'd you get into the business?
Well, actually, I got into business when I was lucky enough to meet an artist who needed an assistant at a convention.
So what's your art background?
I'm self-taught.
Self-taught?
Yeah, that's disgusting. That's why I said if you get the right books and everything, that can help to get you through. Sometimes art schools can deter a person because as much as there are good art teachers, there are also bad art teachers. And you get someone who's determined to have you draw their way as opposed to helping you be creative. That can stymie the creative juices.
Teachers like that. Okay, and you were talking about how some people would come into the business for money.
Yeah.
But I've heard the money isn't that great, so.
I have a house which I bought just under royalties of one book.
Well, you've already
No, but the thing is,
established yourself very well.
but the thing is, you got a lot of young people coming in, and the first books they get are the X-Men. And the X-Men you can earn in 1 year well over 6 figures. And you don't even have to have a reputation, because the X can provide that reputation.
But don't you forget it, I think they deserve it. Jim Lee.
Jim was totally new when he came out.
No, he did out by that thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, he got it because he was willing to. And a lot of times, Ron Liefeld's career didn't get going until he started doing export. Before that, he wasn't doing anything. The thing is, most of the older artists didn't want to do the export books because they were now becoming formula. The young kids were willing to do it. And they're the ones who made a fortune out of it.
And I think they're pretty good.
Well, some are, some aren't. I mean, again, the thing is, the fact that you feel that they're good, it's just as valid. If I didn't like that and you liked it, that doesn't make your opinion any less.